Story 1. That voice in your head isn't you. It's a voice you have heard, you have grown up with, and you have learned. The best thing about learning is that it is never finished. You can learn a new voice. I am still a long way from replacing the voice, but it has made many scenarios much easier to manage. Story 2. Had a breakthrough revelation. I expected everything to change. Didn't. She then explained to me that change doesn't come from merely understanding what your issues are, but from doing the hard work to undo those ingrained behaviors. Oh, damn. Story 3. Honestly, the most therapeutic thing a therapist has ever done is just widen her eyes in horror. It's so validating to realize that yes, in fact, that thing that happened was really messed up and I'm not the crazy one. Story 4. I needed to leave my husband. I raise goats. She said, "Do you ever just go out there and beat the crap out of one of your goats, hoping it will turn into a sheep? He is always going to be a goat." Story 5. Though I have been to therapy, this one is something I read online randomly. Just because things could have been different does not mean it would have been better. I basically took it as a reminder to stop fretting about what you should have done differently or how people treated you. You could have taken a completely different approach the way you wish you had, and something negative could have still happened. What happened happened. You cannot live in the past. All you can do is move forward. Story 6. Quit invalidating your feelings just because you think others have it harder than you. It is not a competition. Story 7. That you can decide that being 80 or 90% sure you are making the right decision can be enough. It is never usually going to be 100%, so aim for 80 or 90. Also, I could potentially equally regret having another child as much as not having one. I was so stuck in the fear of regretting not having more that I never considered the equal opposite could be true. Now, I am happily one and done and feeling very confident in that choice. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 8. This might seem odd, but 3 weeks into working with her, at 30 years old, this therapist looked right at me and asked, "Do you see yourself as a person?" My brain broke in that moment. I felt like my understanding of myself shattered in that exact moment when suddenly everything made so much sense. You see, my whole life, my family treated me as a prop, an accessory, a program, an extension of themselves, anything but a whole, actual human. So, I never saw myself as one. Any courtesy, kindness, or grace I would extend to others, I didn't deserve because I wasn't a person. Since then, I try to ask myself some very pointed questions when I am mean to myself. If someone else in the exact same situation told you about it, would you tell them they are overreacting? If you saw someone else who looked exactly like you wear that, would you think the same mean things about them that you are saying to yourself? What would you say to someone else in the exact same situation? It's still a long road, and it didn't fix me, but it gave me a lot of perspective and started me on a healing journey I never knew I needed. Story 9. Why is it your job to fix everyone? Why are you always at fault, or do you think you are? Why can't you give yourself grace? Story 10. Happy people do not urinate in other people's Cheerios. It helped me look at criticism differently, more productively. Story 11. She confirmed that something I wasn't sure how to categorize was indeed sexual abuse. The fact that it was a gray area was intentional on the abuser's part, not because it was complicated and I was maybe crazy for wondering. When I said I wasn't sure what to do with that information, she said I didn't have to do anything with it, just know it was wrong and not my fault. Seems so simple now, but it was like I could finally stop torturing myself wondering if it really was bad or if I was blowing it out of proportion. Story 12. It is not your job to manage other people's feelings and happiness. Fill your cup first. Do not tear yourself down to build others up. Do not set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Story 13. Stressful situation. Is it something I can control? If not, do not stress too much over it. If yes, what is within my ability? What can I do about it to make it better? Story 14. Feeling your feelings doesn't involve processing them with logic or telling yourself a story about why they are happening. It's listening to your body, realizing what muscles hurt, what feels tight, fluttery, nauseous, hot, cold, or whatever else. It's noticing the burning feeling in your eyes, the lump in your throat, or feeling so light you could float away. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 15. I had a lot of fear of authority figures, so I avoided talking to the administration at my medical school about any issues I was having. We traced it back to an experience I had with gun violence from an authority figure. He said, "Well, Dr. Neil doesn't have a gun." Seems really silly, but that mantra really helped me. Whenever I would talk to my dean, I would think to myself, Dr. Neil doesn't have a gun. And it would help reassure me that I was safe in that situation. I use that mantra for a lot of people now. Story 16. When putting up boundaries, they will be mad at first. Then they will get over it. They do not have any other option. Story 17. He told me about the drama triangle and that the rescuer role exists. Oh boy. Time to change everything about the way I do relationships. Story 18. You need to protect your family at all costs, even if it means not talking to some of your other family members. I have been estranged from my narcissistic mother for 2 years now, and it has been amazing. It is also important to know that just because you do not have children, that does not mean your husband and dog are not your little family. Recognize who is in your family bubble and protect them at all costs. Story 19. Your brain may not be telling you that you are worthless, but your behaviors and your choices are not those of a person who has good self-worth. Story 20. Tell whatever is making you anxious in the moment that you see it and acknowledge it, but it is done taking up space. You do not owe anyone anything. Story 21. I was lamenting my various issues, and in frustration stated that I hated my brain. Without even hesitating, she just said, "Oh, your poor brain. It is doing its best." It was probably just something she said to try and talk me down from my theatrics, but it really made me aware of my negative internal monologue. Like, yes, my brain is doing its best. It is just not very good at being a brain, but it is trying its best. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 22. You have to forgive your past self for the decisions you made in order to survive the situation you were in. Story 23. As someone who is highly anxious and always feels the need to be doing something, I never give myself time to recharge. I just pause, plug in, and charge until I have 50% or slightly more, and then I keep going. Then I repeat. You know that is self-harm, right? My current issue is that I have not stopped this behavior. Acknowledging and understanding it is the first step, but I really need to work on breaking the cycle. Story 24. That yes, I was surrounded by difficult people, and it wasn't that I was one. It was that simple. Suddenly, it clicked that I didn't deserve what I got. Then there was the other time when I said I sometimes wished my children had a bigger family and maybe I should get in contact. She asked me a simple question: what makes you think they won't treat your children the same way they treated you? You were a child too when they did it to you. That solidified my decision for no contact. Story 25. Do you want to get married and have children? Or is society telling you to get married and have children? Story 26. When I was thinking of staying with my now ex, I asked, is he acknowledging his role in the fight, or is he just forgiving you? I had never thought to ask. It turns out he believed he was totally blameless and was just forgiving me. That question ended the relationship. Story 27. No positive change comes from a harsh place of judgment. I am still working on that when it comes to myself, but it has helped my parenting immensely. Story 28. You can't control others, but you can control how you respond to them. This is the process of acquiring values. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 29. If I am having really negative thoughts or dwelling on something bad, do not think about the pink gorilla. If you specifically tell yourself not to think about something, that is all you are going to think about, right? Well, if I tell myself not to think about something completely random or silly, now I am going to think about that instead. Also, It is okay to tell people you are overwhelmed and need a break. Story 30. I was diagnosed with autism at 32 years old. The best thing that ever happened to me. I sought therapy with that in mind and finally found someone who was certified and experienced. He was incredible. He basically told me I wasn't a terrible person and really made me feel like maybe I do belong on this planet. I haven't considered suicide in a long time. He also helped me realize I was married to a narcissist and planted the seeds that would later help me leave. I will always be grateful. Story 31. Me, talking about my crippling anxiety. My doctor, as I am listening to what you are saying, and as I am watching you go crazy on that fidget spinner, I am wondering if anyone has suggested you might have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Story 32. When I start to clean, something comes over me, and I cannot stop until I have deep cleaned the entire area. It was exhausting, and it made me not want to clean at all. Just make it better than you found it. All of the others say, it does not have to be perfect. B work is just as good. No, it is not. B work is seen as not living up to my potential, whereas better than you found it puts a positive spin on it. Story 33. Be the mirror, not the sponge. When someone shares their anxiety or stress with you, it is not your job, nor does it make you a good person to immediately feel those things too. Show them empathy, but try not to absorb. It was not easy at first, but eventually, I was able to do it. Story 34. You do not need permission to do things or to set boundaries. My whole life, I waited for someone to tell me that doing something was okay. Story 35. Stop comparing your behind the scenes to other people's highlights. In this age of social media, it made me stop being too hard on myself and learn to appreciate what I have. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 36. That I should look for some paperwork. Turns out I was diagnosed a long time ago and everyone just forgot. Story 37. That my parents' choices were baffling to her too. She helped me work on a lot of things, but that was the most validating thing that made me realize I wasn't crazy for being overwhelmed by my family. Story 38. It's not my fault my dad killed himself. Sounds cheesy now, but at 13 it felt like it, especially since he was waiting for trial for hurting me. Story 39. If you ever feel at home with a person when your home was never healthy, you need to reevaluate why you are with them. Story 40. You were talking about a horror story, except it happened to you. She was talking about my childhood. Story 41. My child's therapist told me I was half the problem. My child loved that. We laugh about it now, 20 years later. It was true. Story 42. When explaining a rather petty situation I had as a teenager with my mother, he said, "Oh, it looks like your mother put you in charge of her feelings. I haven't been the same since, and it has been so wonderful. I love my mother dearly, faults and all." Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 43. I was telling my therapist about an incident when I was a child in first grade, and the kids at school bullied me. I tried to brush it off as a silly incident that didn't mean much. She told me, "You were a child when it happened. Just because as an adult it seems small now doesn't mean it was small then. To the child you, it was something significant. It was a major light bulb moment, and it made me realize how many things from childhood I downplayed later as an adult." Story 44. Not every friend has to be a close friend. It is okay to have different types of friends with varying levels of closeness or how much you confide in them. I used to struggle with being a loner, and it really impacted my mental health because I could count my friends on one hand. I saw people as either acquaintances or close friends, with no in-between. This advice helped me appreciate the people who are not super close, but still play a meaningful role in my life. Story 45. I used to incessantly worry about my family back home. She asked if my worrying about them from the other side of the country did anything to help the situation. As soon as I realized my worrying didn't affect a single thing other than myself, I stopped. Story 46. I told her that I have felt fake for decades because I do not enjoy people much, but I am fantastic at pretending I like everyone to keep the wheels greased in my personal and professional life. She helped me reframe it as masking because I am likely quite neurodivergent. Story 47. If you keep doing everything the same, nothing will change. I made a tiny change, and the resulting butterfly effect ended 4 years of major depression. Story 48. 2 things. Some people just cannot be better than they are. This realization helped me accept some of my parents' behavior. If you were truly just lazy, you would not feel so guilty about it. This comes up when discussing how my symptoms are often labeled as lazy or unproductive. Story 49. Me. How did I end up with post-traumatic stress disorder? Everything seemed normal until it all came crashing down. It seems so ludicrous that my childhood caused something that is typically thought of as the affliction people who see the worst of humanity get. Therapist. Maybe you aren't aware yet that you have seen part of the worst of humanity as well. It is possible you haven't broken down the wall that would help you accept it. Boom. Glass shattered right there in that office, staring at the decorative rocks on the beige table between us. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 50. I explained a lot about the dynamic in my house growing up. She said, "Well, that's really frustrating," validating my feelings. Story 51. Someone I was responsible for committed suicide. I was also responsible for several other people at the time and afterwards, and I told my therapist how scared I was of another suicide under my charge. Me. Oh man, I don't know what I would do if another one hung themselves. Therapist. Well, what would you do? Me. I would be calling you immediately. Therapist. See, you do know what you would do, so you don't need to wonder anymore. At the time, it was very helpful and stuck with me. We talked a lot about my what-ifs, and all said and done, I have saved myself a lot of anxiety by following that same thought process. What would I do if something happened? I would probably do something else, so I don't need to stress about it anymore. I have a contingency plan. There's only so much within my control. Story 52. The most recent one. I told her how I had to text my best friend something that I knew would upset her. Then I blocked her immediately because I did not feel like dealing with her angry reaction that she would inevitably have. Once I blocked her, I felt relieved, but I assumed it would just be temporary until I gave her time to cool down. I shared this with my therapist, and she said, "So, it sounds like you know how she is going to react to you, and she has done this before and you just tolerate it?" Well, yeah. Then she just kind of stopped and let me think about it. It was then that I made the decision to break up with my best friend. Abusive relationships are not limited to romantic relationships. I never thought of a friendship being abusive. Another instance was when I was sharing my recent struggle about my insecurities, and she said, "Every time you think a negative thought about yourself, think about who said it to you. Does their opinion matter?" This case was referring to some hurtful things my ex said to or about me. That was a good one too. Story 53. You don't have to earn your place in this world. You can simply exist for yourself and do what makes you happy. That impacted me greatly. As a severely parentified child with self-worth issues, I still struggle with not feeling worthy of many things if I am not being useful. Story 54. Don't bleed until you've been shot. Basically, stop worrying about the worst-case scenario, because it could end up being nothing. Story 55. Stop expecting you from everybody else. Unrealistic expectations were leaving me hurt. I finally realized I cannot expect myself from others because nobody is me. Story 56. I asked him how he dealt with all the negativity directed at him, and he responded that they were not his feelings. I do not think he even realized how profound that was. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 57. Your mom wasn't a bad mom so much as she just wasn't the mom you needed sometimes. This helped me see my mom's good intentions, heal many past resentments, and find radical acceptance for her. I never thought our relationship would be this strong, and I'm incredibly grateful, as she is at the end of her life. Story 58. A bit grim, but when she cried and said she was proud of me after I said that I want to live, I was always high risk and had attempted to take my life during the time she had known me. Seeing that she cared so much was really something. She wiped her tears and said, I am sorry, but I think it is important that we are comfortable with feeling. That moment really changed me. I was so set on never feeling anything, and then I only felt misery for years. Then I learned I was uncomfortable with feeling, and that is where so much growth came from that I had not even considered happening. Story 59. Just last week, I was stressing out about the current events in the world, and he said something that made me feel much more optimistic. He said, of all my clients, you are the one I know would be able to survive an apocalypse. You have certain skills that would be very useful, and your childhood trauma has made you good at looking at all the options before making a decision. You are solution-driven and you have survived hard things before. You can handle whatever life throws at you. I found it oddly comforting, and it has helped me keep my head on straight for the remainder of the week. Story 60. Not my therapist, but my nurse practitioner. I am highly suspicious that you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, not borderline personality disorder. Never once considered that would be my issue. Trial treatment, immediately feeling better. Got a job very shortly after and moved out of my parents' house with my boyfriend. I am 32. The amount of years of psychiatric intakes, psychiatrists, therapists, multiple forms of therapy, and different medications I was on that never made a difference. This one woman who was up to date on mental health for women recognized what was actually wrong and fixed it in under 2 months. She was literally a lifesaver. Story 61. You were not raised by your parents. You had to grow up with them as first-time parents. I am the eldest daughter of baby boomer parents, experiencing a life crisis where I now have to be the parent to them. My therapist emphasized that I am viewed as their peer, not necessarily their child, and that is why they treat me the way they do now. It helps me to get rid of a lot of my guilt if I fail to help them in any way because I am now relearning to be their child instead of a person of the same rank as them. Story 62. Oh goody, mine is recent. Just last session, I was describing certain thought and behavior patterns as insidious little eating disorder stuff. I also told her about how my therapist from my teen years dealt with the situation poorly and how my mom denied it entirely. Near the end of the hour, I started trying to backpedal a bit, saying, it's not so bad, and I think I have a handle on it, and so on. She said, look, you started talking about this, so I do think it's big enough that you're reaching out for help. I could be just another person who doesn't respond to your cry for help. But I think you're heading into relapse territory, and I think I can help, and I think you can see the other side of this. So that's what is going to happen instead. I have an intake session with a nutritionist tomorrow. Wish me luck. Story 63. In our society, it is actually quite rare that siblings have close bonds as friends. You did not fail. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 64. The single most important thing I internalized from couples therapy is to not try to manage other people's emotions. Leave that up to them. So, if you are going to a place you want to eat at and your friend says they are fine with going there, do not agonize over whether they really want to go there. If they do, all is well. If they do not, then they should have told you that, but that is their problem, not yours. They lied to you and are experiencing the consequences of having done so. It is not your fault they did that, and it is unhealthy to constantly try to account for the possibility that your friends are lying to you. Trust that what they are telling you is true, and let them experience the consequences if it is not. Operating under the assumption that my friends are not lying to me and making it their responsibility to deal with it if they do lie about their preferences made dealing with things a whole lot easier. And if it turns out that someone you know does keep lying to you even after you explain all this and then keeps insisting that it is your fault you did not know and puts all of their unwillingness to just be honest on you, maybe you should consider whether they are actually someone you want to interact with. Story 65. Make a buck off it. I used to get into fights with dog lovers who either let their dogs defecate or harass people, or else were unsavory narcissists using the dogs for attention. So the therapist challenged me to 1. Not get into fights, 2. Smoke tobacco if it helps me transition to calmer methods, and 3. Make money off the one task they fail at. The job most dog lovers fail at is picking up after their dogs. So I made a small business doing that, picking up other people's dog waste. So far, I've made a ton of money but have cleaned up about 4.5 tons of waste from my community. A drop in the bucket, but still something that's a work of passion. It's not even hard work. Story 66. You are allowed to leave whenever you want. I have always told myself that I was only allowed to leave relationships once someone had done something so wrong that I could leave. However, it was never bad enough to actually go. She explained to me that I was actually allowed to decide for myself if I wanted to be in a relationship. Story 67. We will uncover your trauma later. While I was in therapy for regular anxiety, 3 years later, long after I ended therapy, I realized she was right, and I had truly buried trauma from past situations my brain blocked out. Uncovering that now, without therapy at the moment, is quite challenging. She also supported the idea that I might have autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That led to me understanding myself better. Story 68. If you have high blood pressure, you would take blood pressure medication, right? So why do you draw the line at medicating chronic depression? That was so eye-opening as a male that I was stunned. I started taking buspirone the next day, and after a few weeks, I realized life really isn't all that bad. Story 69. Not a therapist, but my mom went to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings when I was a teenager and dragged me along. I remember one guy said, "You have to do things you do not want to do to get where you want to be." It has stuck with me for 30 years now, and whenever I have to do a thing, it pops into my head, and I end up pushing myself through it. Story 70. I figured out I have attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. Then I went on medication and started realizing I have all kinds of unhealthy behavior patterns that I developed because I have attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. So medication isn't all I need to do. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 71. Don't kid yourself into thinking you are preventing food waste by eating the excess even after you are full. Food is equally wasted whether it is thrown out or eaten after your body no longer needs it. It is wasted either way. Story 72. He told me to hold a box, and he started putting things inside it. He asked what was happening. It's getting heavier. What is it doing? Weighing me down. Put the box down. And what do you feel? Relief. Now try putting that box of thoughts and burdens that are weighing you down on the inside. I have to say it worked pretty well. Story 73. She recommended the book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. At least 95% of that book could have been plucked directly from my life. She also diagnosed me with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and helped me learn how to notice and manage flashbacks and triggers. Part of that diagnosis was seeing how it affects me in everyday life. Story 74. Not everything you do has to be productive. This is the phrase that really helped me out of my depression. Understanding that productivity isn't the sole reason for my existence. Story 75. If my friend is suffering and I do too much to help them, I am robbing them of the chance to learn how to pick themselves up. Finding a healthier balance is an ongoing struggle, but things are much better now. In the same vein, even if I know exactly what the healthiest or best thing would be for me to do in that situation, that does not mean my solution would work for them. They have a different life, a different way of thinking, and a different set of tools. Only offer advice if asked, and respect that you only know what would work for you. Story 76. I want you to write a letter to your dad forgiving him. He sexually abused me from ages 6 to 11, and this was the final step in our process. After 2 weeks of trying to wrap my head around how to forgive him, spending so much time and energy thinking about it, I told her I couldn't do it and instead said I would just say I forgive him to stop thinking about it. I couldn't stand forgiving him and him thinking that what he did was somehow okay. Then she said, "That's exactly it, you're forgiving him for you, not for him. You're taking back your power and choosing to not spend your energy angry and upset with him." It was such a revelation to me to go through that mental exercise and release that hold he had over me. I never did write that letter, but I've moved on and am in such better mental health, even 3 years after that session. Story 77. You do not have to be responsible for everyone, Just yourself and your children, obviously. You are allowed to put down all the stuff you are carrying. You can say no. You are allowed to exist. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 78. This one seems easy enough. But since she said this, I have had a better understanding of my feelings. Emotions are not black and white. You can feel more than one emotion at a time, and that is okay. Story 79. The anxiety you are experiencing is not your enemy. It is like an overprotective friend trying to keep you safe because it has seen you hurt before. Do not fight it. Show it that you are stronger than it thinks. Story 80. When I said something like, "Why do I care?" he made me repeat that 5 times, and then again at the start of every session. Story 81. The best you can do changes every day. Doing your best every day does not mean meeting your personal best every single day. And that is fine and normal. If you only have 50% to give to something on a particular day, and you give all 50%, then you actually gave or achieved 100%. Story 82. About a terrifying near-death experience caused by complications during the birth of my daughter. It may always be a day of sorrow, but you can feel joy and sorrow simultaneously. Story 83. When we were done with the session, he then told me, "We had a good session. I can tell you've been doing better. You haven't mentioned or complained about your ex today. I blew up, but now I get it." Story 84. He said, "He knows you won't do anything." After I expressed my disapproval and utter contempt for my ex's actions. I was astonished my ex was doing something. I don't recall right now what it was. When my therapist said that, I was like, HA. My ex knows me better than I do. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 85. Let go of the anger for you, not for them. You are poisoning yourself. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. They can still go away. Don't justify, argue, defend, or explain. We role-played a lot of this. I became a master of saying no and repeating the exact same phrase 50 times until they finally gave up. I'm comfortable around difficult people because I was raised in a challenging situation. Stop looking for people who have negative qualities. Not everyone who is nice is just waiting to trap you. Some people are actually nice. We worked a lot on dissecting current people and new people in my life. My therapist helped me choose friends because I lacked the most basic friendship skills. Kindness isn't weakness. Story 86. I procrastinate way too much. Does it affect your work negatively? Do you still make your deadlines? Well, yes, I always finish in time, and it is usually very well done. Then is it really a problem? Story 87. My therapist told me, "It is not your fault, and unfortunately, it is your problem." It really helped me shake the victim mindset that I had been carrying for most of my life. I realized that I had no responsibility for the trauma that I experienced, but it is entirely up to me to fix what was done or continue to live in misery. It was very empowering. Story 88. We attack vulnerability with ferocity. Sure, sometimes anger is justified, but as someone who struggled with a number of anger issues, I had to learn there was a part of me that was trying to protect itself because it felt like no one else would. Story 89. I was getting ready to go to court for a protection from abuse order, and she said, "Well, technically he's hindering your therapeutic progress because you can't process trauma if you're still going through it." It was crazy for me to process that. As long as I had him in my life, he would be creating more and more trauma for me. It's honestly a really sad realization, but it's the truth. Story 90. That you only need to do something at 70%. 100% is not necessary. That took a huge weight off my shoulders to be given that permission after a lifetime of struggling with perfectionism. Story 91. I was struggling to exit a toxic relationship. In the second session, I was asked, "How would you feel if you got her pregnant?" I got in the car and drove to her house. I broke up with her and canceled subsequent sessions. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 92. Progress, not perfection. To go with the half-hearted is better than no effort. It took a while, but my need to do the whole thing and do it 110% correctly has slowly changed. Something I saw recently was, the life you have now is the life you used to dream about. It makes me stop and think about what I have in a different way. Story 93. She had me create a family tree and explain each person. If I said they had anger issues, they received a red box. That poor tree was full of red boxes. She said it stops with me. I am really trying to break that pattern, and I see one of my children has the potential to carry that anger as well. We really need to keep working on this, and she suggested we continue with our sports. I'm still in treatment, but I feel things are getting better. Story 94. I told her I wanted to end my life and thought about death on a daily basis. She got mad at me, not by raising her voice, but by expressing how angry she was that I could not see value in my existence. She said I have so much love to give, and she was upset that I could not recognize that. I was surprised that a relative stranger could have such strong emotions about my death. It made me reevaluate how others, like friends and family, would react to my passing. Story 95. So, it is all about you? I did not stop trying to help my friends in difficult situations, but I did stop diving in headfirst to solve all their problems after that. Story 96. You have to look at your pain. You can't ignore it, as it never gets resolved that way. Look at it and take its power away. Story 97. I had a therapist tell me that I have a strong sense of justice. That really clicked with me. I now have a better understanding of why I seem to care about things more than other people. Story 98. There is a difference between a reaction and a response. Reactions are involuntary reflexes. Responses are within your control. I then had to learn how to respond effectively to whatever came my way. Before we dive into the next story, a big thank you for lending me your ears. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just a click away. Story 99. Something to the effect of, you actually do not have to listen to or believe your thoughts. Your brain produces a monologue, and some brains, like mine, more constantly and harmfully than others, but that absolutely does not mean any of it is true or even relevant. I cannot fully express how much of a revelation this was to me the first time I heard it, and how it has impacted my mental health and life overall since. It was a paradigm shift. Maybe other people realize this on their own, or perhaps other people's thoughts are benign enough that it does not matter. I have no idea, but this is perhaps the one thing I have tried to instill by casual repetition into my own children. Story 100. You are trying to control your emotions when you need to regulate them. It is the difference between suppression and understanding. Story 101. If you got drunk every night, you would be an alcoholic. They then asked what someone who smokes cannabis daily is and how that might be different or the same. I quit then and there after smoking daily. It messes with my mood. I tried going back once or twice and have regretted it every time. Story 102. My husband and I were struggling with a compulsion that he had. It made me so frustrated and angry. We went to therapy for it, but eventually the therapist pulled me in alone and said, "Look, because of the circumstances of your life, this is something that he will likely struggle with his whole life, and you cannot change him no matter how much you want to. So you have two choices. You can leave him, or you can stay and move forward knowing this is part of him and find a way to come to terms with that." It flipped a massive switch in my head, and my anger about it just disappeared. I realized I had no power to change him. It made me let go of so much frustration. And as much as I wished I could change this about him, what we shared far outweighed any negatives. We just celebrated our 27th anniversary. Story 103. She showed me the worry tree. I swear that thing changed my life. It is a way of organizing your worries into real or hypothetical worries and then dealing with them based on that. Honestly, absolutely amazing. Story 104. It's really specific to a horrible social situation I was in, but you did nothing wrong. Basically, I was in a toxic friendship group where abusive people were welcomed in because everyone was a people pleaser. When I started calling a particular one out for increasingly concerning behavior, people didn't like it. They thought I was just being unkind to their friend whom they barely knew. It snowballed to the point where I talked about it to an outside friend who mentioned it, and the conversation got back to them, making me feel like a backstabbing traitor. Almost all of them abandoned me. It collapsed the walls of how I approached almost every social situation in my life, resulting in a post-traumatic stress disorder response. Everything. I was a shell of myself for a long time. No, I just wasn't strong enough at the time to walk away until I was forced out. It turns out the concerning person was, in fact, a predator. Who knew? Therapy is still ongoing, but breaking down all the reasons for so many of my friendships being a mess has been extremely useful. Mostly, they were various forms of trauma and neurodivergence. Therapy can change your life for the better. It really can. It did for me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.